Hi, you're watching Goodfellas History. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett,
I'm Nick.
I'm Davis.
and today I want to talk about the Delta variant. Alright, so the Delta variant, also known as the B.1.617.2 variant, is a SARS-CoV-2 mutation, and as we know, SARS-CoV-2 causes the COVID-19 disease. Um, So a more contagious form of the virus, the Delta variant was first identified in December of 2020 and soon became the dominant strain in India as well as in Great Britain. And it was identified in India. So became the dominant strain in India as well as in Great Britain. By the end of June, Delta has already made up more than 20% of cases in the US. According to estimates by the CDC, the number is rising quickly and predictions state that the strain will soon become the dominant one here. So there's that for you. The WHO has called this virus the fastest and fittest, and by mid-June, the CDC labeled Delta as a variant of concern. And now I'm going to read a quote by this one doctor, Dr. Wilson. He is a Yale medicine epidemiologist, and I really like how he just how he kind of formats this. So it's kind of a longer quote, so just bear with me. But Dr. Wilson says, quote, "It's actually quite dramatic how the growth rate will change. Delta is spreading 50% faster than Alpha, which was 50% more contagious than the original strain of SARS-CoV-2, making the new variant 75% more contagious than the original. In a completely unmitigated environment where no one is vaccinated or wearing masks, it's estimated that the average person infected with the original coronavirus strain will infect 2.5 other people. In the same environment, Delta would spread from one person to maybe 3.5 or 4 other people. Because of the math, it grows exponentially and more quickly. So what seems like a fairly modest rate of infectivity can cause a virus to dominate very quickly, like we're seeing now. Delta is outcompeting everything else and becoming the dominant strain," end quote.
Lovely.
Yeah. So, it's way more infectious
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
than
almost
just,
twice as much. That's crazy.
yeah, we talk about how, obviously, especially at the beginning, people compared COVID to the flu, and we were like, no, COVID's way more infectious, like, the rate of infection's a lot higher, it's not just the flu.
Hmm.
This variant is 75% more contagious than that.
Jesus Christ.
So, this will basically become the dominant strain.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is those at risk. So it comes to no surprise that unvaccinated people are at great risk to contract this variant. So I want to talk real quick about those who are vaccinated have been shown to have great immunity to the variant, especially those who have gotten an mRNA vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine is 88% effective against symptomatic disease and 96% effective against hospitalization from Delta. It's very, very good numbers. Moderna has also reported studies showing that their vaccine is effective against Delta as well. However, those studies have not been peer-reviewed. Oxford AstraZeneca, which is not an mRNA vaccine, was 60% effective against symptomatic disease and 93% effective against hospitalization. So around the same when it comes to hospitalization, but the effectiveness against symptomatic disease does go down a little bit. However, I would still say it's pretty good. Johnson & Johnson also has reported that its vaccine is effective against the Delta variant, showing only a small drop in potency compared with its effectiveness against the original strain. So again, and I'm probably going to say this a few times, but get your vaccine, please. This is the biggest thing you can do to...
Don't tell me to do my body. My body, my rights.
Yeah, this is basically like, again, with it being so much more infectious and with basically people, things going back to normal, people are going without masks, even unvaccinated people, like I would strongly urge people to get their vaccine. And again, I'm sure I will be saying that a few more times over the segment. Alright, now also I did want to talk about, besides those unvaccinated, kids are also a concern. A recent study from the UK has shown that children and adults under 50 were 2.5 times more likely to become infected with Delta.
God damn it.
Which is a big concern for kids because there's not yet been a vaccine approved for children 5 to 12 years old in the US. So, kids could contract this variant at school from other kids and come home and then give the variant to unvaccinated family members, whether they just haven't gotten the vaccine yet or if they can't get the vaccine due to, underlying medical reasons. And so that's a big deal of concern too, because, I'm not sure when we're going to have a vaccine available to that age group, and they can spread it. And like I've said before,
And contract it. I mean, like, that's the thing.
They can contract it, they can spread it, and then, this is already more infectious, so I don't even want to think about how schools are going to be. So, this is very, very depressing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another factor, we're kind of still talking about those at risk. Another factor is the type of town you live in and how many people around you are vaccinated. In some cases, a low vaccination town that is surrounded by high vaccination areas could end up with the virus contained within its borders, and the result could be hyper-local outbreaks. So this would change how we view this pandemic. Instead of like a 3 to 4 year pandemic that dies off once enough people are vaccinated or naturally immune because they've had the virus, like, we kind of see in the past with other pandemics, an uptick in cases would be compressed into a shorter period of time. And so, at first that might sound great, but we have to keep in mind, and, this was kind of brought up before, local healthcare systems will be overwhelmed in these towns with low vaccination rates, and when that happens, more people will die. Now, with the rising numbers that we have here in the U.S., it's less likely that that will happen here. Obviously, we have pockets in the U.S. that, aren't as vaccinated as others, but it's very likely to happen in other parts of the world. And so I also took a look at COVID vaccine doses administered per 100 people, and while the U.S. and Canada and, Western Europe and China are doing all great, I mean, when you look at Africa, who, again, a lot of these countries have very high populations, they are not doing so good. So this is a big deal of concern for places in Africa, just Africa in general. And then obviously, since this is a mutation, this is a new strain, when you have places that have very low vaccine, vaccination rates, this is breeding ground for new mutations to occur, probably worse than Delta. Now, granted, it's, a lot of times when it comes to viruses, they can mutate themselves out of existence, but the possibility that this could get worse, is very likely. And again, we're already seeing this with the Delta variant. And so a way to kind of, and so I want to talk about one more thing, and then we can kind of discuss it. A way, people have been throwing out this idea of waiving intellectual property rights when it comes to the vaccine. So India and South America brought a proposal to the World Trade Organization, basically to waive these intellectual property rights so that this vaccine can be mass-produced and you can release generic forms of the vaccine so that we can get basically the whole world vaccinated so that we don't have to worry about these, variants. And actually, something positive about the Biden administration is President Biden actually came out in favor of that proposal early May, somewhere around there.
Based.
And so I don't think anything has kind of come at that yet. Obviously, people are mad about it because, it'll affect companies' bottom lines, and now this will give companies less of an incentive to make things that work or to make things that help us because the government will just take it away and yada, yada, yada. But, I believe when it comes to, just healthcare in general, or just, a matter of public safety, I don't feel like profit should be the concern, or companies' bottom line shouldn't be the concern. So
I would also add on to
waiving these.
I would also add on top of that most of the development and research costs those companies had was on the backs of the taxpayer.
Yeah.
So they didn't develop it just out of their own blood, sweat, and tears. There was a lot of public finance that went into that development and research that came out of this. So, yeah, no, I don't feel bad if they're losing out on this patent and making a shit ton of, as much money as they want. They're still going to make a shit ton of money in the production of it. It's just that their intellectual license is going to be removed, which means that other companies will be able to produce their product. It just won't be underneath their label, which, if it comes to saving people's lives, I don't give a good goddamn. Especially when the public was the one that financed it.
Yeah.
For sure. And so I don't think it's really not a great counter argument. You know, especially to me, somebody who again wants Medicare for all. Like, I don't. When it comes to the healthcare industry, I think profits are a no-go.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, we can't just act like the pandemic's over just because here in the U.S. we are getting, you know, our vaccine numbers up, and that, you know, that's not the case everywhere. Number one. And number two, you know, like I just got done saying, when we have pockets of the world that, you know, we're kind of leaving in the dust, they, you know, can't get access to the vaccines, they don't have, you know,
and the thing is
type
that
of rollout that we do, it'll create new mutations that could render our vaccines useless. We might have to get, again, new vaccines, booster shots. Like, if you thought it was a pain in the ass to get an mRNA vaccine that was, you know, 2 doses, like this, you know, it could get a lot worse.
Well, let's also add to the fact that it would basically turn Africa, and much of the southern hemisphere, if you will, into a breeding ground for these kinds of diseases, not through the fault of their own, but through the fault of our economic market system providing them resources. It's going to destabilize the region, but it's going to destabilize the region not to the benefit of working people. It's going to destabilize it to the benefit of autocrats.
Yep.
I mean, the reality is, what's disconcerting about this is that it's not going to go away here. Period, because there's so much trade. We're in a global economic market. We've been that way for 200 years. We have created a modern mechanism of that market that we call globalization or globalism. But that does not change the practical reality of the fact that our environment is shifting, and these diseases that we're seeing are going to be more prone. We're going to see these megacities turn into major biological hosts for various different viruses and strains, just like before when we saw major ecological and geological changes. I mean, the Black Death didn't just come out of nowhere. It was born in China, which had mega cities, and it was born out of a period of time that there was geological and climate changes, ecological changes in China. I mean, the only reason why this takes place, most of these viruses are moving from one group of mammals, usually rodents, in this case bats, and are finding their way into being able to survive in human hosts and turning humans into hosts. I mean, that's one of the reasons for this. I mean, I would just say, imagine if the virus is able to transition hosts to where now birds are able to carry it. And if not birds, then imagine if bugs are able to carry it. You know, mosquitoes.
Yep. Oh my gosh.
Like the thing is that if we don't solve this problem now, it is likely that this is going to continue. And it might not be COVID. It might be another mega disease. It might be another virus. COVID was just really susceptible. I mean, COVID was just more susceptible to us, mainly because we didn't have the proper infrastructure in place. But it's kind of like, you know, fighting the last war. Every single time one of these things pop up, you know, we did exactly what we did when the SARS outbreak took place, but it wasn't enough this time because this was more infectious. The Chinese government was not able to contain it the way they did before, and it spread everywhere.
Yep.
You know, like, and unfortunately, once again, this turned into a political football. This should never have been that. These diseases, this is going to happen. This is just the natural reality of living in a world with urban centers. There's always going to be strains and variants of disease. It's going to happen. We need to be prepared for it. It's like we live on a planet of tectonic plates, so we know earthquakes are going to happen. Am I going to blame an earthquake that took place in like the Pacific if like a major tsunami hits like California? Am I going to blame like, are we going to blame Japan if like a tsunami takes place on their like shelf and it hits Okinawa and wipes out a U.S. military base? I mean, like, what? These are natural phenomenon. Nobody had any control over this. This was a natural process that took place. And this is one of the reasons why the whole lab conspiracy is frustrating to me. Because the idea is that this was human created, and that's why it was so incredible. When in reality, you go back decades and you see epidemiologists writing about the fact that places like Wuhan and various other places in China and in India, and even in the United States, in South America, are breeding grounds. These mega cities are breeding grounds because there's a lot of people. And because you have so many people living close together with one another, there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of livestock, there's a lot of mammal population living amongst one another. Historically speaking, that's a breeding ground for disease, for viruses. It's going to happen. We know this is going to happen. I'm not going to cry out for China to break down its mega cities. The real solution to this problem is that we need to stop with these conspiracy theory bullshit.
Yeah.
And we need to not have patience for it. Vaccines don't cause a fucking thing to happen. It's just a slight change that happens in your body. No one has ever died from a vaccine. No one has ever had any long-term negative effects due to a vaccine. They are a net neutral deterrent for virus development.
Yeah, and there are 3 different types of vaccines in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel so skeeved out by one of them for some reason, there are 2 others. There's even one that if you hate the idea of mRNA, there's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that is a one-shot, it is not mRNA, that you can get that will provide you protection.
Mm-hmm. It's all about protection. It's about controlling the risk.
Yes.
Here's the thing. There's a reason why they keep using percentages. There's no way that they can guarantee that you are not going to get COVID.
Yeah.
We have a considerable decrease of likelihood of having it. A, because our immune system has been tempered due to the vaccines to deal with this. Hence why we're probably not going to have to face or have concern over the Delta variant, because it seems like this vaccine that we received is resistant to it.
Yeah.
That does not mean that that's permanent. And more importantly, this could also reduce our immune system to potential other viruses that are going to come down the line that might not be respiratory.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is our respiratory system is one of by far and away most vulnerable systems that we have. This is one of the reasons why, and it's because it's the center of operation. Our respiratory system is the engine that keeps our body going, because it provides oxygen for our blood, and without oxygen we die within seconds. So, I mean, and that's why. So we breathe in a bunch of air. Our body is really resistant to respiratory diseases for obvious reasons, but they're also the most common ones we get. That's why everybody has the common cold. It's respiratory disease. It's the area that's most exposed to the environment. So.
And I would also, when we talk about making the arguments, and Dave has pointed out in the other episode that we did on climate, making an argument for the right wing, because there's been studies done. They're less empathetic. They
I don't.
Yada yada.
I don't.
So
I think the only way we can make an argument with the right wing when it comes to something like this is either we scare the living shit out of them, or we're insanely mean to them, to the point where they realize that they don't really have a leg to stand on.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring it back to like an economic kind of side of things, since that kind of speaks. That's more their language.
It's a great motivator.
So basically, because we talked about, or I mentioned, waiving the intellectual property rights will hurt these companies. Like they're not going to want to, make things in the future because the government will take it away. Yada yada. Well, I would argue that when we have a government shutdown, it's a much more of an economic catastrophe than having these few companies share their processes, their ingredients, so that we can mass produce this. I mean, it's kind of like a what would you rather have? Would you rather have, Pfizer and Moderna keep their secrets, make more money or whatever, or would you rather have another government shutdown? Because I mean, again, if we have a mutation that's even deadlier, I mean, we can't. It's not like we'll just never not have another government shutdown.
Well,
or yeah, and
so I would say, when talking to right-wingers, I would even go closer to their own base interests. So, you don't like wearing a fucking mask, you don't like these places being shut down, you want to go do your thing, you want to be able to hang out and have these things, well, we're not going to be able to deal with this unless people have access to this fucking vaccine. If you want shit to go back to normal, it's going to require these companies to take a hit. They're already making a lot of money. It's fine, though. They'll recover. And you know what? There's a process for them to make that money back. You know what it's called? It's called the courts. They can sue the government. If they have grounds where they feel like there's precedents in place that should protect their intellectual property rights, then they can sue the government.
And then us taxpayers will pay you then.
Yeah. The taxpayers will pay you back.
Yeah.
The reality is that, that's not even really making necessarily a rational appeal to them. It's just making a point. If you want your life to get back to normal, where this is no longer an issue, well, we need to get vaccinated. We need to wear masks for the time being, the way the CDC says, and move on. And we can stop with this childish nonsense. Like, if the CDC told me you have to wear a mask while you're in your house all the time, you can never take it off, yeah, I would find that a little strange. I'd find that a little strange. They'd have to have something quite substantive, and there would have to be a risk that'd be quite substantive to force me to do that. But wearing a mask out in public, I mean, we wear hats, we wear clothes in public.
Yeah.
Just because it's something that you're not
by other people too.
Well, it's like you're used to wearing other clothing, Like I never for me it was never, oh, how dare you not wear a mask? It was like, dude, it's just for everybody's benefit.
Yeah.
I'm less outraged about people not wearing masks than the people who are actively advocating not wearing masks. And the reason for that is one group. I mean, there's 100 reasons why people don't have a mask on. They might have forgotten. I mean, there's been a number of times where I've just walked out the door without my mask, and I need to wear that to get into work, and so I had to go back and get it.
Yeah.
That's
I borrowed a mask from a friend.
Yeah, that happens. People forget. It's the advocate anti-mask and anti-vax shit that bugs me. And the thing is, I don't think most of the population is for that. In fact, I mean, I don't think this is a nothing burger, but I think that at the end of the day, explain to people that if we do this right now, we won't have to deal with it in the future. Take a small hit now. There are going to be people who bitch and complain. But so long as that number of people who bitch and complain are a marginal group, and everybody else just deals with the shit and moves on, we'll be able to contain it. And I feel like a lot of left-wing politicians really didn't do a great job communicating this. There were only a handful of online voices that I saw that handled this very well, because they're going to be labeled as like a libtard or something if they did anything. I don't mind being called that. The CDC is filled with professionals. They're experts. I don't want to worship experts, but I am going to contend that they probably know a hell of a lot more about diseases than I do. I'm not a doctor. And once again, it's not that just because the CDC said to do something. It's that the CDC argued why we should do something, and they laid out their arguments. They gave out their reasoning. And this is a good talking point.
They're doing what they're supposed to do. We prop them up we put in some of the best minds when it comes to that field to work there, so that they can offer their guidance in times like this.
Well, not just
now,
that.
We don't want to listen to them.
I don't, like, I wouldn't even use the flower rhetoric of that. I would just say, like, listen, okay, if you broke your arm, are you going to treat it yourself? Are you going to go online to figure out, if your arm's broken or not, or are you going to go to a doctor?
The doctor.
You're going to go to a doctor. Okay. So, how is this any different? Like, I would argue that this is like the CDC requiring people to wear masks to go to stores, to drive. I'm sorry. That's not really that oppressive. Controlling the amount of people who go in into stores like Costco really isn't that oppressive. It's just a non-issue to begin with that was turned into a political football for whatever fucking reason. Because I feel like this shot the Republican Party in the foot, and it was fucking conservatives who started this shit.
Yep.
I mean, like once again, like, what's the downside of wearing a mask? What's the downside of
It's slightly uncomfortable
You look
sometimes.
like a sheep.
Well, like, yeah, what? Is this fucking high school? Are we in high school again now? Like, what? People have kids. They don't have the luxury of worrying about if they're sheeple or not.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous. And this is where I say being mean to them. Sometimes you gotta be mean. And maybe I get this from my old man, but it's like, if you act like a dumb fuck, how do you expect me not to treat you like a dumb fuck? Right?
Well, I don't...
So, I agree.
Sorry,
but,
David, you go. You haven't talked about...
Alright. Well, this kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about again with, like, arguments and why, realistically, this is the main reason that I wanted to do this with you guys, is that while I hear many good talking points and whatnot, I always feel that we can always refine our arguments. And I think that the better we're able to refine that and the better we're able to turn people to, like, at least agree with us, not necessarily come over to the right, like, our side even, we can still push for the right agendas. And the reason I don't fully like the being mean to them is that most of the time people don't respond well to, like, condescension, and that's often how it's going to be viewed. And while, yes, they could be very stupid, I do feel that it's a much better approach to try and reason with ideals that they have in mind. Because you're usually going to get a more receptive audience if you're like, listen, this is why I agree with this, but here's a reason that's outside of the box or something that you care more or more passionate about that is going to benefit you on that.
See, my counter to that is that most of the people who already hold these opinions are already operating irrationally.
And I agree.
So at this point, like, and here's the thing, I'm of the mindset, just from my own experiences working in corrections, there were people that I could reason with, and then there's some people that if I'm mean to them, A, they realize that I'm not going to take their bullshit, and B, they change their attitude really fucking quick to where then we can actually have a reasonable conversation. And when I talk to right-wing people all the time, they tell me, oh man, you're being really reasonable. There's a lot of people online who are not this way. After I just basically were mean to them, challenged them, and they're like, wow, you're just being super reasonable. I didn't realize that. And the reason for that, and I think this gets back to the whole conservative mindset, is that they're looking for somebody who's strong to lead them. This might be social psychology, but I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, when I have to interact with people, and this is the strategy that I do all the time, and somehow magically I'm able to convince them of these points every single time when I do it, it's not that, oh, I like being mean to people. It's just that sometimes that contradiction, that condescension, just the sheer weight of you slamming down on them is enough to kind of shock them out of their mindset to where they are able to second guess positions that they already hold, and they change their argument. And once they change that argument, then we can actually begin having a discussion. But right now, there is a segment of the right wing that exists in this country that believe that masks somehow actually make the virus worse. It's an indication that you're a sheeple, and that vaccines somehow cause autism or other kind of maladies.
Magnetism.
And those people it doesn't matter how nice you are to them or how well you refine your arguments to them, they are going to remain into their mindset until they are shocked out of it. And
I'm of two minds on that, because while
it's just from my own experiences.
Exactly. And now I'm going to pull from my own experiences. And this is with conservatives that I've spoken to as well. A lot of the time, and oftentimes this is the whole reason they're conservative even, is because they feel that the left is condescending to things that they think they know more about. So oftentimes when I'm mean to them, or if I'm like, hey, you're wrong and you're being stupid about this, they actually build more walls to block me out. Because now they're in their head, they're cementing themselves as, I know I'm right, this person's like just being a dick, and now I disagree with them even more.
Well,
like oftentimes they'll tune out a lot of arguments that you present to them because of that.
It also really depends on where you're talking to and who you're talking to.
And that's true.
So like online, I generally just throw out facts. But when I'm in an interpersonal conversation, I don't mind being mean. And once again, the meanness is not me calling them dumb fucks. The meanness is me not taking their shit.
Well, no, and I agree with that.
And so the thing is that like for me, there's a fine line between condescension and assertion.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to assert my argument, and I'm going to make that argument with facts and logic. I'm going to use facts, bro.
Mm-hmm. Nice facts.
And the thing is that I'm going to make that assertion. I'll let them have their say. But this is where the meanness comes in. Because the meanness is in yanking their reasons for making their arguments and exposing it to the harshness of reality. I've had conversations with my granddad. I've had conversations with my cousins, where I've basically taken their preconceptions, because oftentimes a lot of this is based off a preconception, and laid it out to reality. And the funny thing is that they either have one or two answers. Either they agree that I'm right, or they disagree to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the reality is I'm not aiming to try to convert the Trumpers. I'm trying to convert people who are just one off from being a Trumper.
That's what I was actually leading up to as well.
So,
because the Trumpers oftentimes are too far gone. But there is a massive base, not only in the Republican Party, but often in independent voters, that can be swayed.
I think that's fine, but I mean, it also kind of gets back to what we talked about last week with the online left. Like, I think that oftentimes this, oh, you're being mean and condescending argument is just a obfuscation. It's a talking point to not really address the real issue. And that bugs me. So I'm not going to change, the way I would say, I'm not going to change my overall strategy in trying to convince people because a handful of people think that I'm being condescending. Because, I mean, I'm sorry, if you ever listen to a Baptist preacher talk about a gay couple, I mean, they're pretty fucking condescending.
I agree.
So, the issue here is not who can be meaner. The issue is how you can be mean tactfully. And I think that there's enough people where you can shock them into realizing, oh, I might not be right on this. Or maybe I don't know as much as I think I do about this. Maybe I need to rethink this. But sometimes it just requires that. I mean, that's everybody. Like, the Iraq War, when I was 14 years old, I mean, I was pro-Iraq War. And that was before I started seeing guys come home with missing legs. It shocked me. It shocks your principles. And that shock is necessary. I mean, nobody's ever changed minds by being nice.
I think you both are onto something. I do think, I feel like it depends on the person, right? I feel like some people, maybe it's better to shock them. Other people, I think it's better to kind of, listen to them, like actively listen, maybe try to get on their level, and then offer a different perspective, offer a unique argument, whatever. But at the end of the day, though, it cannot be you are not going to change somebody's mind if they are not at least a little like receptive to your arguments. And so I think at a certain point I could make, you know, an argument that couldn't work. I can make 4 or 5, 10 more arguments. They could be as unique as possible. But if someone has their head in the sand, you aren't going to change their mind. And then I feel like it comes the kind of the shocking that Nick's talking about. Maybe it requires a shock in their own life. I mean, I'm sure there's many people out there who have changed their attitude when it comes to COVID because they have a family member die. And as horrible as that is, there are people out there that's probably what it's going to take. So I do feel like you're both kind of onto something. I don't think there's anything wrong with either.
I think that it's a case.
Approaches.
I think
I was going to say,
it's case
allow
by
me
case.
to bridge the gap. Yeah, allow me to bridge the gap here. And I think this is the pros of having a multi-person show. Know your audience, refine your arguments, and take both sides of the lessons on this and just implement in your life. I think at the end of the day, for me personally, the end goal of this show is just presenting as many people as possible with arguments and like abilities to reason that we can push our agendas that we know are correct.
And I would also say that, you know, when I adopt my harsher critiques, it's for bigger issues. It's not, oh, you think that people should own AR-15s, but I think that people should own shotguns. Like, there's no point of being a dick on that point. The reason why I'm a dick when it comes to anti-vax and when it comes to the anti-mask crowd is that there are actual people that are going to be harmed considerably because of this. I mean, and it's the same thing with the pro-war crowd. And why I'm also mean to various lefties sometimes. And it's because of the material harm that they're committing themselves to other people. Because I believe I'm a consequentialist when it comes to this. The anti-vax and the anti-mask movement has caused physical harm to people in this country based off of either attention-seeking delusionalism or self-interested action. And the whole reason why the Delta variant is becoming an issue now is because people like this are essentially right now, at least in the media spheres, allowed to continue on and on about this. And the talking point of the online left is mean. It's just not good enough. I'm sorry. I'd rather be I'd rather the online left be mean on this, pushing back, and making an argument that we need to deal with this now, otherwise there's going to be bigger problems in the future, and have a handful of people upset at us, or at least upset in general with this, then basically see grounds to people who really don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and honestly don't really care. Because at the end of the day, what most of these people really strike me as is people who don't care. It's not their problem. They haven't had to deal with it. And they just want life to get back to normal because it disrupted their schedule.
And I'm fine with people not caring if it really only affected you. If it really only affected you and you just did not give a fuck and you wanted to throw caution to the wind, I would be like, you know what? You go for it. But unfortunately, your choices do affect others. And so, and like, I don't think when we talk about being mean and stuff, I don't see how it can be so mean if the outcome is saving people's lives or, you know, preventing people from having long-term effects from a virus. Again, if this was, you know, an issue of like, oh, like just whatever smaller issue it is, calling somebody names or whatever, that's probably uncalled for. But I think if you call someone selfish for not wanting to get a vaccine, I honestly don't believe it's that mean because I think it's true. I do.
I think that at the end of the day, like, unfortunately, there's a number of people that have weaponized civility politics to where, like, I get where Davis is coming from with this because I do agree, just being a dickhead to people, that The reason why I'm a dickhead on this issue, but on other issues, I'd be far more open to different persuasions or different arguments on their end because of the material consequence of this. So maybe this is not the best topic to talk about this, because I think that there's a real problem to this that's affecting us right now, that is disrupting our ability to function as a society.
I definitely agree. I do want to get off this part of the topic, though, because as I said, we were talking about the Delta vaccines and whatnot. So I guess my final part with this is the reason I find it important in like how we approach this and like kind of understanding your people is because at the end of the day, since it is so like in our face right now and so deadly and has so many long-term consequences, we need to be thorough in how many people we can turn over with this.
And I would say don't be afraid. Like, I think that unfortunately we have this tendency as a left, because we are more empathetic, to want to save as many people as we can. If your arguments aren't landing and there's no way of breaking people from their perspective, just move on. It's shitty, but we have to do it. Because the goal is to get more people to at least wake up to the problems that we're dealing with. And if they don't want to take the red pill, I'm not going to shove it down their throat. You know, there's just no way. There's no way of doing that. But afterwards, I don't mind being a little mean. But I agree with Davis. We need to try to find as many arguments that we can develop and grind our axioms down so that we can get more people on our side on this issue. And I think, fortunately, there's a lot of people that laid groundwork for this. It's more about marginalizing the group of people that are not going to help us along the way and keeping them marginal and moving forward.
I agree.
All right. Well, if no one else has anything to add, I guess I'll close us out.
Okay.
The Delta variant, we are seeing this virus get worse, and so I think we need to stop. I think we can't deny it any further, or we're not going to have a lot more space to deny it, because it's just actively getting worse. And so I would please, anyone watching this who hasn't gotten vaccinated, I would strongly encourage you to get your vaccine. It's free, it's easily accessible. This is honestly, especially right now with us opening up and people going without masks, vaccinated or not, this is really the one thing that's going to help us get through this. Because when it came to masks, it was about human behavior. When it comes to vaccines, it is all about biology at that point. And so I would strongly encourage everyone to get their vaccine, stay safe, stay informed, and, I really hope and want to have hope that we can get through this, and, there isn't a more deadlier strain around the corner. I really hope this is kind of the peak, and we can start to get more people vaccinated, get more countries vaccinated, and we can go back to normal. So this has been Goodfellas History, and we will see you later. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.